conference hall smelled like recycled air and desperate career ambitions. Perfect. I stood at the back, my 4 sensory stalks twitching with what the humans would call amusement, watching their galactic history professor drone on about the significance of martial heritage in understanding species psychology. Boring stuff, really. The kind of lecture that made you question why you'd traveled 3 parsecs to attend this dump of an institution. But then Professor Aldrin, bless his monotone delivery, announced the semester project. "Your assignment," he said, adjusting his glasses in that peculiarly human way, "is to recreate a piece of ancient armor from your species' martial past. Full historical accuracy, working materials, proper documentation. Due in 6 weeks." The auditorium erupted into nervous chatter. The Volnari students immediately started arguing about which dynasty to choose. The Kelthans were already pulling up holographic references of their ceremonial battle plates. And me? I was watching the human in the 3rd row, Marcus Webb. Quiet kid. Always sat alone. Took notes on actual paper like some kind of historical reenactor. The guy literally brought a thermos of coffee to every class, which I'd learned was basically human fuel. He didn't look nervous. He looked thoughtful. Then something else. Was that a smile? That should have been my first warning. 6 weeks. That's how long I thought we had before things got weird. Turns out, I was off by about 5 weeks and 6 days. The next morning, I found Marcus in the workshop section of the campus fabrication center. Most students hadn't even started their research yet. This guy had already commandeered an entire workstation and was surrounded by what looked like historical documents, metallurgy texts, and several very sharp-looking tools. "Starting early?" I asked, letting my translator convert my clicks and whistles into standard galactic. He looked up, and I noticed his eyes had that slightly manic gleam humans get when they're really interested in something. "Just doing some preliminary work," he said. "Gotta get the measurements right." "For what period?" I asked, genuinely curious now. Human history was surprisingly violent for a species that claimed to value peace. They had about 5,000 years of organized warfare to choose from. Medieval European, feudal Japanese, Roman legionnaire. "Earlier," he said, turning back to his documents. "How much earlier?" "Bronze Age." I blinked. Well, my species doesn't actually blink, but I did the equivalent. "That's ambitious. Most of those designs are barely documented." "Oh, this one is documented pretty well." He pulled up a holographic display showing what looked like archaeological findings. Mycenaean Greece, circa 1200 BC by their calendar. Dendra panoply style. I looked at the image. It was a full body suit of bronze plates, looking like something that would stop a missile and probably give you heat stroke in the process. "You're going to make that? In 6 weeks?" 3 weeks, actually, Marcus said, measuring something on his display. "I've got other projects." Now he had my attention. 3 weeks? That's over 15 kilograms of bronze plate work. The riveting alone would take— "I know what I'm doing," he interrupted, but he wasn't being rude. He was stating a fact. "My family has a background in this sort of thing." That's when I should have walked away. Should have focused on my own project, which was a nice, reasonable recreation of a Thralic ceremonial guard's helmet. Simple, documented, not insane. Instead, I said, "Mind if I observe? For, academic interest." Marcus shrugged. "Sure, just don't distract me when I'm doing the heat treatment. Bronze is tricky." Tricky. Right. Over the next week, I watched this human do things that made my sensory stalks hurt. First, He didn't use the fabrication center's modern equipment. No laser cutters, no nano forges, no molecular assemblers. He had actually requisitioned access to the historical methods section, which was basically a corner of the workshop filled with ancient tools that most students didn't even know existed. He was hammering bronze, by hand, like a barbarian. The templates need to be historically accurate, he explained, while beating a sheet of metal into submission. Modern methods leave different stress patterns. Anyone who knows armor can tell the difference. Who would possibly care about stress patterns in a student project? I asked. He gave me that look again, the one that suggested I was missing something obvious. I would. Fair enough. By day 4, he had completed the breast and back plates. They were beautiful in that brutal, functional way that human crafts often were. Every rivet was hand-set. Every edge was properly rolled. The metal had that slightly irregular surface that came from manual hammering. "How do you know how to do this?" I asked, watching him work on the shoulder guards. "Family tradition," he said, which I was learning was his default answer for everything. "My grandfather was a historical metallurgist. Dad continued the work. I grew up in a forge." "Your species keeps forges? In the modern era?" "Some of us." He tested the fit of a shoulder piece against his frame. "Some things shouldn't be forgotten." By the end of week 2, other students started noticing. The Volnari delegation came by to sneer at his primitive methods, right up until they saw the quality of his work. Then they got quiet. The Kelthans actually asked him for advice on their own projects. And Professor Aldrin stopped by. Just watched for about 10 minutes. Then left, without saying a word. "I think you impressed him," I said. "I'm not trying to impress anyone," Marcus replied, working on the greaves for his legs. "I'm trying to do it right." Week 3. He was adding the final pieces. The arm guards, the collar protection, the helmet, which was this magnificent thing with boar tusks attached, because apparently ancient humans decorated their armor with parts of dangerous animals they'd killed. Because of course they did. I helped where I could, mostly by handing him tools and asking questions that he patiently answered between hammer strikes. "Why bronze?" I asked. "Your species had steel by the medieval period. Better protection, lighter weight." "Bronze is what they used," he said simply. "This isn't about making the best armor. It's about recreating history, understanding what they went through." They being? The warriors who wore this into battle. He held up the nearly complete breastplate. 3,000 years ago, someone wore something like this and stood in a line with their brothers while enemy soldiers tried to kill them. This armor kept them alive, maybe, if they were lucky and skilled. The way he said it made my translator hiccup. There was something in his tone that didn't quite convert properly. Respect? Reverence? Humans had this weird relationship with their violent past that I was still trying to understand. By the start of week 4, he was done. 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The complete suit of armor stood on a display frame in his workspace, and it was magnificent. Every piece fit together perfectly. The bronze had been treated to match the historical patina. Even the leather straps were hand-cut and properly treated. "So what now?" I asked. "Presentation isn't for 2 more weeks." Marcus grinned. "That should have been my second warning." "Now," he said, "I clean it." "Clean it? It looks perfect. It needs to be worn, tested. That's part of the historical accuracy." He started unfastening the pieces from the display frame. The original armor showed wear patterns, battle damage, use, can't recreate history without recreating the experience. You're going to wear it? Obviously. Where exactly do you plan to test ancient bronze armor on a peaceful academic station? His grin got wider. The Combat Simulation Center. Oh no. The Combat Simulation Center was primarily used by security training programs and the occasional student who wanted to blow off steam. It could generate holographic opponents of varying difficulty levels. Most people used it for basic self-defense scenarios or sporting events. Marcus signed up for Historical Combat Scenario, Bronze Age Warfare. I didn't even know that was an option. This is insane, I said as he started putting on the armor in the preparation room. Even if it's just holograms, you're going to be in there for hours. That armor weighs 17.3 kilograms, he said, fastening the greaves. I've been conditioning for it. You've been what? Training, strength work, endurance. You think ancient warriors just put this stuff on and went to battle? They trained their whole lives. He secured the breastplate. I've been preparing since I chose this project. Of course he had. 20 minutes later, he stood in full panoply, holding a recreated bronze sword and a figure-8 shield that he'd apparently made in his spare time. Because he had spare time, apparently. You look ridiculous, I said. I look accurate, he corrected, his voice slightly muffled by the helmet. The simulation started. What happened next, I recorded for my own project, because there was no way I could properly describe it without evidence. The holographic system generated opponents based on historical records. Bronze Age soldiers, weapons, tactics. Marcus didn't just fight them. He fought like he'd done this before, like he'd trained for years, which, considering what he'd told me, he probably had. The armor worked exactly as designed. Blows that should have been devastating glanced off the bronze plates. The coverage was complete. The mobility, despite the weight, was functional. He could move, strike, defend. It was like watching history come alive. After an hour, he finally stopped the simulation, breathing hard, but grinning like a maniac. "How do you feel?" I asked when he came out. "Hot, tired, bruised." He started removing the helmet. "Perfect." "Perfect?" Now I understand what they went through. The weight, the heat, the restricted vision, the fear. He looked at the armor with something like affection. Now it's real. I noticed something then. The bronze had scratches, dents, wear marks from the holographic weapons. "You damaged it," I said, "after all that perfect work." "I used it," he corrected. "Like it was meant to be used. Now it tells the complete story." Professor Aldrin's presentation day arrived. Students filed in with their projects. The Volnari had a beautiful ceremonial helm. The Kelthans brought an entire guard's uniform. Others had various weapons, shields, and armor pieces ranging from adequate to impressive. Then Marcus walked in wearing his complete panoply, carrying his sword and shield, and the room went silent. The armor showed every hour of his work. It also showed every minute of his testing. The bronze bore the marks of combat. The leather straps were worn. Even the way he wore it, comfortable and confident, spoke of familiarity. "Mr. Webb," Professor Aldrin said slowly, "would you care to present?" Marcus set down his shield and removed his helmet. "Mycenaean Greek armor, Dendra panoply style, circa 1200 BC. Full-body bronze plate protection, historically accurate materials and construction methods, fully functional and combat tested." Combat tested, one of the Volnari students scoffed. This is an academic exercise, not a military drill. Marcus turned to look at them, and I saw that expression again. The one that said they were missing something important. With respect, he said, his voice perfectly polite and absolutely terrifying. You can't understand armor without understanding what it was made for. This wasn't ceremonial dress. This was survival equipment. Men wore this into battle, knowing they might die. They trusted their lives to the smith's work and their own skill. He picked up his sword, moving with practiced ease. Every piece tells a story. The weight that built strength, the heat that built endurance, the restricted vision that built awareness, the protection that built confidence. Professor Aldrin was leaning forward now, actually interested. Your assignment was to recreate ancient armor, Marcus continued. I recreated the experience, because that's what history is, not just objects, people, their struggles, their solutions, their courage. He set the sword down gently. So to answer your original question, Professor, do I want mine cleaned or blood-stained? He gestured to the marked, dented, obviously used armor. I think the armor should tell the truth. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then Professor Aldrin started clapping. Slowly. Then faster. Then the rest of the room joined in, even the Volnari students who'd been sneering earlier. Mr. Webb, the professor said when the applause died down, that is what I call historical accuracy. Full marks. After class, I caught up with Marcus as he was carefully packing his armor for transport. That was quite a presentation, I said. It was honest, he replied. That's all I was going for. Your family must be proud, the Forge Masters. He smiled. Actually, I should clarify something. When I said my family has a background in this, yes, my grandfather wasn't just a historical metallurgist, he was a combat engineer. My father served in military vehicle restoration. And I've been training in historical combat sports since I was 8 years old. He secured the last strap on his carrying case. When I said family tradition, I meant we've been preparing for war, studying war, and respecting war for generations. I felt my sensory stalks straighten. Your species is supposed to be peaceful now. We are peaceful, Marcus said, but we remember what peace costs. We remember what our ancestors sacrificed, and we don't ever want to forget how to fight, just in case we need to defend that peace. He hefted the case containing his armor. That's what this project taught me. Not just how to make armor, but why it existed, why it mattered, why we should remember. Do you think, I asked carefully, that other species need to remember their martial past as well? Marcus considered this. I think every species needs to understand where they came from, the good and the bad, the glory and the horror. Because if you forget history, you're doomed to repeat it, and some history really shouldn't be repeated. He started walking toward the exit, then paused. But it also shouldn't be forgotten, because the day you need that knowledge again and don't have it, that's when you lose everything. I watched him go, this human student carrying 3,000 years of history on his back, and I understood something fundamental about his species. They prepared, they remembered, they trained, not because they wanted war, but because they'd learned through bitter experience what happened when you weren't ready. And somewhere in my mind, a question formed that I really didn't want to answer. What happens when a galaxy that's forgotten how to fight meets a species that never forgets? I had a feeling I was about to find out. 3 months passed after the armor project, and I thought that was the end of it. Marcus got his perfect score, became something of a campus legend, and life returned to normal. The armor sat in a display case in the military history wing, a testament to human dedication and mild insanity. I should have known better. The alert came during breakfast, not the usual student notification ping. This was a station-wide emergency broadcast, the kind that makes your internal organs do uncomfortable things. All students and faculty report to emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Hostile forces have entered the system. Repeat, this is not a drill. The cafeteria exploded into panic. Tables overturned. People ran in every direction. My roommate, a Kelth named Vorin, grabbed my arm with 3 of his appendages. "What do we do?" he shouted over the chaos. Good question. The station had security, sure, but it was an academic facility. Our defenses were designed to handle the occasional smuggler or drunk freighter captain, not actual hostile forces. I looked around for someone in charge. The faculty were just as panicked as the students. Security personnel were rushing through, trying to direct people toward the shelters, but they looked terrified. Then I saw him. Marcus Webb, standing perfectly still in the middle of the chaos, his face completely calm. He was looking at something on his personal tablet, reading with that focused intensity he got during exams. "Marcus!" I pushed through the crowd. "We need to move." He looked up. "Who's attacking? Does it matter? We need to get to shelter." "It matters." He showed me his tablet. He'd hacked into the station's external sensors. Of course he had. Krelvin raiders. 3 ships. They're not here for conquest. They're here for supplies and hostages. The Krelvin. I'd heard of them. Pirates who operated in the outer systems. Vicious but practical. They took what they wanted and left, usually after killing anyone who resisted. "Then we definitely need to hide," I said. "Hiding won't help." Marcus was already moving, but not toward the shelters. He was heading back toward his quarters. "They'll scan for life signs. They'll find everyone. Shelters just make it easier to round people up." "So what's your plan? Fight them?" He stopped and looked at me, really looked at me. "Yes." I laughed. It came out as a high-pitched whistle. "You're one human with a Bronze Age armor set. They're raiders with modern weapons." "They're raiders who've never faced organized resistance," Marcus corrected. "They hit soft targets, academic stations, civilian outposts, places with no military presence." He started walking again. "They're not ready for a fight. Neither are we. Speak for yourself." His quarters were organized chaos. The armor was already out of its case, pieces laid out in order. He was stripping off his casual clothes while pulling up the station schematics on his wall display. "What are you doing?" I asked, though it was obvious. "Getting ready." He started putting on the armor with practiced efficiency. Station security has 12 officers. They're trained for civilian peacekeeping, not combat. They'll surrender immediately to avoid casualties. That's probably the smart move. "It's the compassionate move," Marcus agreed, fastening his greaves. "But it means 300 students and faculty become hostages, or worse." He looked at me. "I'm not okay with that. So, you're going to what? Stand in a hallway and challenge them to honorable combat?" "No." He secured his breastplate. "I'm going to use their expectations against them. They're expecting easy prey, frightened academics, no resistance." He picked up his bronze sword. "I'm going to give them something else." There was something in his eyes, something I'd seen before but never really understood. Humans called it resolve, determination, the look of someone who'd made a decision and wouldn't be moved. "You're serious," I said. "Completely. You'll die." "Maybe." He fastened his helmet. "But maybe not. And maybe I can buy time for people to actually hide properly, or for help to arrive." He checked his sword edge, still sharp. "Or maybe I'll get lucky." "This is insane." "Probably." He headed for the door. "You should get to safety. Find somewhere they won't think to look. Be smart." I stood there for exactly 3 seconds after he left. Then I followed him. Look, I'm not brave. I'm really not. But I'd spent 3 months watching this human work with dedication and precision on a piece of history. I'd seen him test himself to exhaustion to understand warriors from 3,000 years ago. And now he was walking toward actual danger to protect people he barely knew. My species has a word for that kind of behavior. Roughly translated, it means beautiful stupidity. I caught up with him in the main corridor. He was studying the station map on his tablet while moving with purpose toward the primary docking bay. "What are you doing here?" he asked without looking up. "Documenting," I said. "For historical purposes. Someone should record this." "Record me getting killed?" "Record whatever happens." He smiled behind his helmet. I could hear it in his voice. "Fair enough. Stay back. Stay safe. And if things go bad, run." The station shuddered. They were docking. Marcus took position in a side corridor that intersected with the main passage from the docking bay. It was a bottleneck. They'd have to come through single file or in pairs. "Tactical advantage," he explained quietly. "They can't use numbers against me here. And the narrow space means modern weapons are risky. Energy blasts could breach the hull. Projectiles might ricochet." He shifted his grip on his sword. "Close quarters combat, my specialty." "You've done this before?" "Trained for it. Never actually done it." He sounded remarkably calm. "But training is just practice for the real thing, right?" The sound of forced entry echoed through the station, shouting in Krelvin. They were inside. Marcus took a breath, let it out slowly. Then he started banging his sword against his shield. The bronze rang like a bell, loud, impossible to ignore. "What are you doing?" I hissed. "Announcing myself." Bang, bang, bang. Ancient tactic. Psychological warfare. Make them come to you. It worked. Heavy footsteps approached. 6 Krelvin raiders armed with energy rifles and combat blades. They rounded the corner, expecting frightened students. They found a human in bronze armor, sword and shield ready, standing like something from a history file. The lead Krelvin stopped, stared, then laughed. "What is this? Costume party?" Marcus said nothing, just stood there, waiting. "Out of the way, primitive," the raider said, raising his rifle, "or we'll blast you and anyone else stupid enough to resist." "No," Marcus said simply. The Krelvin fired. Energy blast, set to stun. It hit Marcus's shield, dead center. The bronze absorbed the energy, diffused it, redirected it harmlessly. Ancient metallurgy meeting modern technology with surprising results. The raider looked at his rifle, looked at Marcus. "What?" Marcus moved. "I've never seen anything like it." He closed the distance in 2 steps. His shield smashed into the first raider, bronze edge catching him under the jaw. The Krelvin went down hard. The second raider tried to bring his rifle up. Marcus's sword took it out of his hands. Literally. The blade, historically accurate and sharp as hell, cut through the weapon's barrel. The raider stumbled back, shocked. The third raider got smart, and drew his combat knife. Close quarters weapon for close quarters. Fighting. He lunged. Marcus caught the knife on his shield, turned it aside, and punched the raider in the face with his sword pommel. Bronze and physics. The raider dropped. 3 down in under 10 seconds. The remaining 3 raiders looked at each other, looked at their unconscious companions, looked at the human in ancient armor who wasn't even breathing hard. "Retreat!" one of them shouted. They ran. Actually ran. 3 armed raiders fleeing from one human with Bronze Age equipment. Marcus didn't pursue. He just stood there, maintaining his position, protecting the corridor, doing exactly what he'd set out to do. "Did that just happen?" I asked, my translator barely keeping up with my shocked clicking. Apparently, Marcus was checking his armor for damage. A few new dents. Nothing serious. They weren't expecting resistance. Once they got it, they lost confidence. More footsteps. Running this time. Station security arrived, led by Chief Torval, a veteran Kelth who'd seen actual military service before, retiring to academic work. She took in the scene. 3 unconscious raiders. 1 human in archaic armor. Me cowering in a doorway with my recording equipment. "Webb," she said slowly. "What did you do?" "Provided resistance," Marcus replied. "They're regrouping, probably calling for reinforcements from their ships. We have maybe 5 minutes. Torvald's military training kicked in. Everyone's in the shelters. We need to evacuate you." "Negative." Marcus was studying his tablet again. "If we evacuate, they'll board the station completely. Strip it. Maybe kill people out of spite." He looked up. "But if we make it too costly, they'll leave. We can't fight a ship crew with 12 security officers and a history student." "No," Marcus agreed. "But we can make them think we can." He pulled up the station layout. The docking bay has 4 entry points. We can't defend all of them with our numbers, but we can defend the main corridor system. Bottleneck them. Force them to fight on our terms. "That's military tactics," Torval said suspiciously. "That's historical combat doctrine," Marcus corrected. "Thermopylae, Horatius at the bridge, situations where small numbers held off larger forces by using terrain and psychology." Torval stared at him, then at me. "Is he always like this?" "Pretty much," I confirmed. She made a decision. "All right, we do it your way, but if this goes bad..." "It won't." Marcus was already moving. "They're expecting easy prey. Let's show them humans remember how to fight." What followed was probably the strangest battle in modern history. 12 security officers armed with standard stun weapons and riot gear, led by a college student in Bronze Age armor, against 40 Krelvin raiders with military-grade equipment. It shouldn't have worked. Marcus positioned people at key choke points. He explained concepts like enfilade fire, overlapping fields of coverage, and fallback positions. The security officers looked at each other like he was speaking ancient languages, which technically he was. But they listened, because what else were they going to do? The raiders came, wave after wave. They had numbers. They had weapons. They had experience hitting soft targets. But they'd never fought anyone who'd studied 3,000 years of human military history. They'd never faced someone who understood that warfare wasn't just about weapons. It was about will, psychology, making your enemy doubt. Marcus held the forward position. Every time raiders advanced, they found him there. Bronze armor absorbing their shots. Bronze sword cutting through their equipment. Bronze shield turning aside their attacks. a historical artifact functioning exactly as designed. Behind him, security officers used stun weapons to maximum effect. Coordinated fire, timed retreats, actual tactics. The raiders expected a rout. They got a coordinated defense. After the third wave broke against Marcus's position, something changed. The raiders stopped attacking. Just stopped. There was shouting from their command channel. Argument. Then their ships undocked. All three of them. They left. The station fell silent except for alarms and heavy breathing. "Did we win?" one of the security officers asked. "We survived," Marcus corrected, finally removing his helmet. His face was flushed, sweating, but he was grinning. "That's what matters." Chief Torval approached him slowly. "You realize you just rewrote station defense protocols." "I just used history," Marcus said. "Your species, my species, everyone's species. We all figured out how to fight, how to defend, how to survive against worse odds." He looked at his dented, scratched, thoroughly battle-tested armor. "We just forgot for a while. Got comfortable." She nodded slowly. "The Galactic Council needs to hear about this." 3 weeks later, I stood in a council chamber on the central station. Marcus was there too, still in his armor. It had become his trademark now. The human who fought raiders with Bronze Age equipment and won. The council was not pleased. Oh, they were grateful the station was safe, glad the students survived, but they were deeply uncomfortable with the implications. "This incident raises concerning questions," Council Speaker Melvrin said. His species, the Torth, had been spacefaring for 6,000 years. They'd forgotten war generations ago. "Your use of primitive combat techniques suggests a reversion to violent thinking." Marcus stood straighter. "With respect, Speaker, there's nothing primitive about survival. The techniques I used were developed over thousands of years by people who needed to defend themselves. They worked 3 millennia ago. They worked 3 weeks ago. Knowledge doesn't become obsolete just because we find it uncomfortable. But surely civilized beings should pursue peaceful solutions." "We did pursue peace," Marcus interrupted. "We built an academic station. We studied together. We learned together. We hurt nobody." His voice hardened. "Then violence came to us, not from us, to us. And when it did, peaceful intentions weren't enough. We needed the capacity to respond." Another council member, a Volnari named Kelth9, spoke up. "Are you suggesting all species should maintain military readiness? That contradicts centuries of peace." "I'm suggesting," Marcus said carefully, "that peace without the capacity for defense is just waiting to be a victim. My species learned this the hard way. Many times. We wrote it down, preserved it, taught it to our children, not because we love war, but because we love peace enough to protect it." The chamber fell silent. "The raiders left," Marcus continued, "because they realized we wouldn't be easy prey. They weren't defeated. They were deterred. That's the point of defense, not to fight wars, but to prevent them." Speaker Melvrin looked troubled. "If other species follow your example, militarize, then maybe raiders think twice before attacking academic stations," I said, surprising myself. Everyone turned to look at me. I was there. I watched humans defend not just themselves, but all of us. Every species in that station. They didn't ask our races or check our credentials. They just fought to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Marcus nodded. That's what warriors do. Real warriors, not conquerors, not raiders. Warriors who understand that strength exists to protect weakness, that preparation prevents disaster, that remembering history keeps us from repeating it. The council deliberated for 3 days. In the end, they created a new program: optional martial history courses, defense training, not mandatory, but available, for species who wanted to remember, who wanted to be ready. Marcus became an instructor. Of course he did. 6 months later, I found him in the new training center, teaching a mixed class of students how to form a proper shield wall. Bronze shields, naturally. Historically accurate and surprisingly effective. "How's the teaching going?" I asked. "Good." He called out a correction to a student's stance. "Most species are surprised how much strategy goes into ancient combat. They thought it was just hitting people with swords. Wasn't it? Hitting people with swords was the easy part." He demonstrated a shield position. Understanding why, when, and how to hit people with swords, that's the actual skill. Plus all the preparation, the conditioning, the logistics, the psychology. A Volnari student raised a manipulator. "Instructor Webb, question. Why do we practice with ancient equipment when modern weapons exist?" Marcus smiled. "Because ancient equipment teaches principles. Weight teaches strength. Limited reach teaches distance management. Simple materials teach maintenance. Once you understand the principles, you can apply them to anything." He hefted his own shield, the same one from the raid, battle-scarred and proud. Plus, there's something about connecting with history, feeling what warriors felt, understanding their choices. It makes you think about defense differently, not as violence, but as responsibility. After class, we walked through the campus. The armor display had been expanded. Bronze Age gear from Earth, ceremonial pieces from a dozen species. A reminder that everyone had defended themselves once. Everyone had warriors. "Do you think the galaxy will be safer now?" I asked. "With more species remembering how to fight?" Marcus considered this. "I think the galaxy will be more honest. Peace isn't the absence of violence. It's the choice not to use violence when you could. But you have to have that choice. Have that capability. Otherwise, you're not peaceful. You're just helpless." That's a very human perspective. Maybe. He looked at the stars through the viewing port. But I think it's universal. Every species here had warriors once. Heroes who stood between their people and danger. We honored them, built monuments, told their stories. He tapped his bronze breastplate. Then we got comfortable and called those stories primitive, barbaric, embarrassing. And now? Now we remember they were necessary, are necessary, will always be necessary. He smiled. Because the universe doesn't care about our comfort. It just is. And sometimes, being civilized means being ready to defend civilization. 3 years later, the Krelvin raiders tried to hit another station, an engineering facility, civilian target. Should have been easy. It wasn't. The station had implemented defense protocols, had trained their security, had people who remembered how to fight. The raiders left after 10 minutes. They spread the word. Some stations weren't soft targets anymore. Attacks decreased. Pirates went elsewhere, to regions that hadn't remembered, hadn't prepared. And slowly, more species started offering martial history courses, defense training. Not militarization, just memory, just preparation. just the acknowledgement that peaceful doesn't mean helpless. I wrote my dissertation on the incident. The Webb defense, how historical combat knowledge influenced modern security doctrine. It became required reading for xenosociology students. Marcus read it and laughed. "You made me sound way more impressive than I was. You fought off 40 raiders with Bronze Age armor. I stood in a hallway and hit people who were trying to hurt students." He shrugged. "That's not impressive. That's just doing what needed doing." That's the thing about humans I finally understood. They didn't see their capacity for violence as special. They saw it as necessary. A tool, a responsibility, something to maintain and control and only use when absolutely required. They'd spent thousands of years figuring out how to fight. Then they'd spent more thousands learning when not to. The combination made them uniquely balanced, peaceful but prepared, gentle but capable, civilized and still dangerous when they needed to be. The armor still sits in the display case. Battle-scarred bronze, a student project that became a symbol, a reminder that history isn't just dates and documents. It's lessons, warnings, instructions written in blood and bronze by people who learned the hard way. And next to it, a new plaque. Simple words. Do you want it cleaned or blood-stained? Answer, honest. Because that's what history should be. Not sanitized, not comfortable, just true. A record of who we were, why it mattered, and why we should never forget. Even when it's written in dents on Bronze Age armor, worn by a college student who remembered what his ancestors knew. That peace is precious, worth protecting, worth fighting for. And sometimes, the old ways work best.